Hey Bible believers, Israel coming here from In Their Word, and in today's video we're going to be covering Judges chapter 8 and Judges chapter 9, and this is going to be day 80 of Through the Bible in 1 year. And if you want to know the next time we produce our next video in this series covering the book of Judges, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we've got a whole playlist as we walk through the book of Judges. And if you want just to make sure you're updated every single time we produce a new video, whether it's Judges or something completely different, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification so you can get instant notifications when we release those videos. So let's get started. So in today's video, we're pretty much picking up where we left off with the narrative of the latest judge that we've found out about, which is Gideon. So in the previous Bible study video, go back and check it. We read about how he basically delivered the Israelites and actually got them out of their captivity. Now what we're going to continue to read is the narrative as it continues to move from Gideon to his sons and this whole scenario and situation that happens with them. So let's get started. So chapter 8 and verse 1 reads, "And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why hast thou served us thus, that thou callest us not when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites? And they did chide with him sharply." So we're getting some division here. And look what Gideon says. He says, verse 2, "And he said unto them, What have I done now in comparison of you? Not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abimelech?" So what Gideon basically does here is he basically says, look, it's kind of like saying, isn't the worst of yours still better than the best of ours? That's what he's basically saying. And look what and then verse 3, "God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb." We covered that in the previous video. "And what was I able to do in comparison of you?" Then their anger was abated, which means their anger stopped, toward him when he had said that. Verse 4, "And Gideon came to Jordan, passed over, he and the 300 men that with him, faint yet pursuing." Now this is interesting because we talked about the 300 men in the previous Bible study video. He's still on a journey with these 300 men, even though it says the scripture says they were faint, but they're still pursuing after the enemies. And look what it says. 5, "And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, The hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thine army." So they're basically saying, look, if you've captured them, then fair enough, we'll help you out. But up until that point, we can't help you. Now, obviously, when you consider what's happening here, they're basically saying, look, ultimately, we are still on the side of the kings of Midian and not on your side, hence we will not help you. Now look what Gideon says in response. 7, "And Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into mine hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And he went up thence to Penuel and spake unto them likewise, and the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered." So he's traveling around to these places. It said they're faint, so obviously they're trying to eat some food to restore their energy, etc., before they go into the battle. But the two places they've gone to now, they've gone to Succoth and they've gone to Penuel. Both places have said, look, if you had the kings in your possessions as captives, then we would help you. But it's sort of, the way you have to kind of consider it is they're not willing to take the risk of Gideon actually overthrowing them, even though we covered in the previous chapter how Gideon had already wiped out the previous army with just the 300 men. So verse 9 says, "And he spake also unto the men of Penuel, saying, When I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna in Karkor, and their host with them, about 15,000, all that were left of all the host of the children of the east. For there fell 120,000 men that drew sword." Okay. "And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And when Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued after them, and took the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host." Now, think about this in comparison to what we covered, I believe it was 2 videos ago. Okay, so day 78, when we got introduced to the character of Barak. Okay, and Barak was supposed to go out and deliver the Israelites, and eventually he did under very specific circumstances. If you don't know the circumstances, go back and watch the video, and you'll realize everything that I'm talking about. And what actually happened, because of the circumstances that ultimatum Barak put God in, basically, God said he was not going to get the glory. And I mentioned it, I highlighted at the time, where he was at the opportunity, he had the opportunity to wipe out his enemies. The scripture says that he pursued after him, but they basically, in 2 scenarios, the opposition were getting away. Whereas in this particular example, God had spoke to Gideon and told him to go, and he basically went, and he's able to capture his enemies. Now look what it says next. 13. And Gideon the son of Joash returned from battle before the sun, and caught a young man of the men of Succoth, and inquired of him, and he described unto him the princes of Succoth, and the elders thereof, 70 men, so 77 men there. And he came unto the men of Succoth, and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, with whom you did upbraid me, saying, The hands of Zebah and Zalmunna are now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thy men, weary. And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. So it's really interesting what the scripture is saying there. It's saying a couple of different things. So Gideon's captured the kings now. He's gone back to Succoth, and he said, look, remember when you said to me, I'm not going to give you or your men any bread because these kings aren't in your hands? Well, now we've got them. And it basically says, scripture says, he took thorns and briars and taught them. Okay, basically it's just a different kind of way of saying he basically beat them. Okay, 17. And he beat down the tower of Penuel, which is what he said he was going to do, and slew the men of the city. 18. Then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna, What manner of men whom ye slew at Tabor? And they answered, As thou, so they. Each one resembled the children of a king. So Gideon's asking these kings, the people you killed at this particular place, what kind of people were they? And they turn around and say, look, they were people just like you. 19. And he said, They my brethren, the sons of my mother. The Lord liveth, if he had saved them alive, I would not slay you. So he's basically saying, look, those are my brothers. If you didn't kill them, I wouldn't be about to kill you. And he said unto Jephthah, his firstborn, Up, slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he yet a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise thou and fall upon us, for as the man his strength. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took away the ornaments that on their camels' necks. So Gideon tells his firstborn, look, you kill the men, but he's basically scared because he's a young man. And they even say to him, look, your father's in power now, so ultimately don't be afraid. But what actually ends up happening is Gideon basically goes out of his way to kill the 2 men. 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son, and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. And to be honest, what he's saying sounds legitimate. Okay. The reason, I guess, ultimately we have the Book of Judges, the reason we're going through this period of years and years and years of departing from God, going into captivity, calling on God again, God raising up a deliverer, the deliverer going and delivering the people, them having freedom in their land, then all of a sudden the cycle starting again, is because after Joshua, basically the scripture goes on to talk about how every man did what was right in their own eyes. Okay, so they worshipped God, they worshipped false gods, they did whatever they felt they wanted to do. And instead of Gideon saying, you know what, okay, I'm going to rule over you, he turns around and says, you know what, I'm not going to rule over you. My son's not going to rule over you, but let the Lord rule over you. So it sounds good, okay? And it's what should actually happen. Look what he says there, 24. And Gideon said unto them, I would desire a request of you, that you would give me every man the earrings of his prey, for they had golden earrings, because they Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give. And they spread a garment, and did cast therein every man the earrings of his prey. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 of gold, beside ornaments and collars and purple raiment that on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that about their camels' necks. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city in Ophrah, and all Israel went thither a whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. Now, let's just keep reading anyway. 28. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more, and the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. So this is really interesting, but think about how it ends. Yes, they did get into peace out of the captivity, but it says ultimately Gideon made an idol. Okay, he created something, and after he created it, now Israel's going a whoring after it, so they started worshipping it, okay, for whatever reason. Now, it's really interesting because at that point, it says it became a snare to the house of Gideon. At that point, he had two options, okay. Number one, he could just leave it, and let it just continue to be a stumbling block for the Israelites. Or number two, he could destroy it. And you'll see, ultimately, both scenarios later on in the scriptures, and how both of those scenarios, how both of those decisions, conclusions, what avenue they'll lead you down once you make those decisions. 29. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. That's Gideon. 30. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body, so 70 sons, begotten. Why? For he had many wives. Now, this isn't the first time we're hearing about multiple wives. Now, one thing you have to consider is some people are going to look at this and say, okay, why did he have multiple wives? Did God accept him having multiple wives? Did God not want him to have multiple wives? And the key answer to your question is, you have to always go back to the scripture and identify what God says, how God treats a matter. Okay, so for example, the first thing, anytime you're considering to talk about marriage, I believe the first thing you're always going to have to do is at least go back to the first original mention of marriage. Okay, now not only is that vital because it's the first mention, but it's the place where God instituted marriage. It's the place where God created marriage and showcased what it is. Now, some of you might say, well, no, that's not true. But the reason I say that's true is because when you get to the New Testament, Jesus didn't point to what Moses did in regards to marriage. He didn't point to what David did in regards to marriage. He didn't point to what Abraham did in regards to marriage, or Solomon did in regards to marriage, or Gideon or Samson or any of those people. Okay, he pointed all the way back to the beginning, to the first mention, to God and God's instance of marriage. And he was basically saying, look, this is what God intended. This is God's perfect will, God's perfect desire. Okay, for a man to marry his wife and to be content. Okay, and those two to become one flesh. We've already seen God said it in the book, in basically, I guess what you call the Torah, okay, the 5 books of Moses. God said it, look, when there's a king that rises up, don't take multiple wives, because it's going to turn you away from God. Now, I'm not saying his multiple wives here turned him away from God, but there's two things you need to identify. You need to identify here. Number one, we talked about the ephod that he created that became a snare to the house of Israel, and they started basically whoring after it and worshipping it. The second thing here is he's had multiple wives, multiple sons, and we're going to read on to see how that actually pans out here. So let's see. 31. And his concubine that in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. And Gideon the son of Joash died in a good old age, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And it came to pass, 33, as soon as Gideon was dead, surprise, surprise, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Baalim, and made Baal Berith their god. So, similar fashion, as soon as the judge that's delivered them out of captivity is dead, or as soon as the key figure has delivered them from that, then they go back into committing whoredoms with other gods, etc. 34. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side, neither shewed they kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had shewed unto Israel. So, not only did they go after other gods, okay, the second thing they did is they forgot about all that Gideon did, in the sense that they didn't even deal kindly with with them. Now, this reminds me of the Exodus, okay, when Joseph was basically the second most powerful person in the world, ultimately, behind Pharaoh, and he migrated his family into Egypt, okay, and then Pharaoh dies, etc., and it says a Pharaoh rose up that knew not Joseph, etc., and started to deal unfavorably with them. Now, that to a certain degree you can understand. You're dealing with two different countries, two different country of people, okay, so that sort of discrimination, stuff like that can happen. What we're dealing with here is Israelites treating Israelites like this. Now, let's go on to the next chapter and see what it says. And Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren, and communed with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether better for you either that all the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I, your bone, and your flesh. So, as it said towards the end of the last text we covered, Gideon or Jerubbaal, however you want to know him as, went to Shechem, had a son with a concubine, called his name Abimelech. Now Abimelech went to his people basically, okay, and said, look, do you want the 70 sons of Gideon to rule over you, or do you want me to rule over you? And he's like, remember, we're bone and flesh, okay, we're the same. Now look what it says next. 3. And his mother's brethren spake of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, He our brother. And they gave him 70 of silver out of the house of Baal Berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him. And he went unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 persons, upon one stone. Notwithstanding, yet Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. So Abimelech, son of the concubine, goes to Ophrah, kills Gideon's 70 sons, okay, and the youngest son, Jotham, somehow hides himself and manages to escape. 6. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Millo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that in Shechem. And when they told to Jotham, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice, and cried and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. The trees went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said unto the olive tree, Reign thou over us. But the olive tree said unto them, Should I leave my fatness, wherewith by me they honour God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, Come thou, reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, Should I forsake my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said the trees unto the vine, Come thou, reign over us. And the vine said unto them, Should I leave my wine, which cheereth God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said all the trees unto the bramble, Come down, reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth you anoint me king over you, come, put your trust in my shadow, and if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely in that ye have made Abimelech king, and if ye have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, Gideon that is, his household, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands, for my father fought for you and adventured his life far and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. And ye are risen up against my father's house this day, and have slain his sons, 70 persons, upon one stone, and have made Abimelech the son of his maidservant king over the men of Shechem, because he your brother. If ye then have dealt truly and sincerely with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, rejoice ye in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Millo, and let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Millo and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. So Jotham here starts with a parable ultimately about these different trees, trying to get different people to roll over them. Eventually they get a bramble to roll over them, and he's basically saying, look, if you dealt completely righteously and ethically and the right way with Jerubbaal or Gideon, okay, and his house, then everything should be fine. But if you didn't deal righteously and rightly and ethically with Gideon and his house, by killing his 70 sons, then let a fire basically come out of both sides, okay, of the opposition, out of Abimelech and out of Millo and those people basically. Even though they've conspired together, let the fire consume both of them, basically. And he basically runs away, because obviously if he's actually around, his brother Abimelech will kill him. Okay. 22. When Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dwelt treacherously with Abimelech, that the cruelty to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in the killing of his brethren. So he didn't have to wait long. Ultimately, it was 3 years before God said, okay, you know what, this is enough time. Sends an evil spirit basically to cause division, as Jotham had actually kind of described in the parable. Let a fire come out and consume them. Look what it says, 25. And the men of Shechem set liers in wait for him in the top of the mountains, and they robbed all that came along that way by them, and it was told Abimelech. So men are coming up the mountain, the men of Shechem are actually robbing them, and basically Abimelech has now realized, has been told what's actually happening. 26. And Gaal the son of Ebed came with his brethren and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. And they went out into the fields and gathered their vineyards and trode and made merry, and went into the house of their God, and did eat and drink, and cursed Abimelech. 28. And Gaal the son of Ebed said, Who Abimelech, and who Shechem, that we should serve him? Not the son of Jerubbaal, and Zebah his officer, served the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for why should we serve him? And would to God this people were under my hand, then would I remove Abimelech. And he said unto Abimelech, Increase thine army and come out. So he's starting to feel himself a little bit, and he's basically saying, okay, look, I should be the leader. Then he goes to Abimelech and says, look, you basically bring out your army, let's go to battle. Okay. 30. And when Zebah the ruler of the city heard the words of Gaal the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled, and he sent messengers unto Abimelech privily, saying, Behold, Gaal the son of Ebed and his brethren be come to Shechem, and behold, they fortify the city against thee. Now therefore up by night, thou and the people that with thee, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be, in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early and set upon the city, and behold, he and the people that with him come out against thee. Then mayest thou do to them as thou shalt find occasion. So look, we're going to set them up. When the morning arises, let them come out, and basically we'll deliver them into your hands, ultimately. And then you can basically do however you please with them. 34. And Abimelech rose up, and all the people that with him by night, and they laid wait against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gaal the son of Ebed went out and stood in the entering of the gate of the city. And Abimelech rose up, and the people that with him from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebah, Behold, there come people down from the top of the mountains. And Zebah said unto him, Thou seest the shadow of the mountains as men. And Gaal spake again, and said, See, there come people down by the middle of the land. And another company come along by the plain of Meonenim. Then said Zebah unto him, Where now thy mouth, wherewith thou saidst to Abimelech that wished to serve him, not this the people that thou hast despised? Go out, I pray now, and fight with them. So he's basically realizing now, look, he was talking all this big talk, feeling yourself, saying, oh, I should be king, I'll wipe out Abimelech and his officers and all of that kind of stuff. He's saying, look, these are the people, now they're here, basically go and back up your talk. Okay, walk the walk, ultimately. 39. And Gaal went out before the men of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him. And many were overthrown, wounded, unto the entering of the gate. And Abimelech brought out a rumour, and Zebah thrust out Gaal and his brethren, that they should not dwell in Shechem. And it came to pass on the morrow that the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. And he took the people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid wait in the field, and looked, and behold, the people come forth out of the city. And he rose up against them and smote them. And Abimelech and the company that with him rushed forward and stood in the entering of the gate of the city. And the 2 companies ran upon all that in the field and slew them. So what seemed to be things turning against Abimelech at that particular time actually kind of worked out for Abimelech, in that he actually started wiping his opposition out that tried to turn against him, backstab him, okay? The same way he backstabbed his father's kids, okay, his brothers. Okay. 44. And Abimelech and the company that with him rushed forward and stood in the entering of the gate of the city, and the 2 companies ran upon all that in the field and slew them. 45. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he took the city and slew the people that therein, and beat down the city and sowed it with salt. And when all the men of the tower of Shechem heard, they entered into an hold of the house of the god Berith. And it was told Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. And Abimelech gat him up to the Mount Zalmunna, he and all the people that with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a bow from the trees, and took it, and laid on his shoulder, and said unto the people that with him, What ye have seen me do, okay, make haste to do as I. So he's cutting the branch from the tree, he's put it on his shoulder, and said, Look, all of you that come with me, do exactly the same, and let's go. And all the people likewise cut down every man his bow, and followed Abimelech, and put to the hold, and set the hold on fire upon them, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem died also, about 1,000 men and women. Okay, so they got the branches, put it at the bottom, ultimately, put it on fire, whether they're going to die from the smoke residue, or they're going to actually get burned up, okay, or the tower fall on them, however it is going to happen, all 3 ways, or if not different ways as well, about 1,000 men and women died. 50. Then went Abimelech to Thebez, and encamped against Thebez, and took it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and thither fled all the men and women, and all they of the city, and shut to them, and gat them up to the top of the tower. Okay, so he's probably thinking, well, been there, done that, it's easy work, basically. He's going to do the exact same thing. 52. And Abimelech came unto the tower, and fought against it, and went hard unto the door of the tower to burn it with fire. So he wants to basically do exactly what he just did in the previous place. And a certain woman cast a piece of a millstone upon Abimelech's head, and all to break his skull. Then he called hastily unto the young man his armor bearer, and said, unto him, Draw thy sword and slay me, that men say not of me, A woman slew him, and his young man thrust him through, and he died. Now this is interesting for a couple of reasons, okay? So he's fighting right to the brim of the tower, basically, so he can set on fire. A woman's thrown something down, hit him on his head, he's about to die, and he says, look, to the guy, he's holding his sword on, but he's armor bearer, kill him. He doesn't want it to be said a woman killed him. Now this is really interesting. I mentioned this already in today's video, but if you go back to Barak, okay, the same thing happened to Sisera, okay, in the sense a woman killed him. So I'm bringing that up to say, is this something that's in his mindset that, oh, you know what, Sisera was killed by a woman, and it was set up in a way where God was actually going to give the honor of that battle to a woman, because Barak basically said he wouldn't step up at the right appointed time. So is that something that's in his mind where he's saying, well, Sisera got killed by a woman in the tent and people still talk about it, okay? He doesn't want that to happen to him. Could that be why? Well, and his young man, as we continue, thrust him through and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man unto his place. 56. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father in slaying his 70 brethren, and all the evil of the men of Shechem did God render upon their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. Now, it's interesting, I'll bring this up. I wanted to bring this up earlier, but it's probably more fitting to bring it up here, okay? The scripture calls what Jotham said a curse, okay? And you might consider it a curse, you might not consider it a curse, but it was interesting to me that it says Jotham fled at the time, and it said he was at Mount Gerizim, okay? Now it's interesting when you think about that, because when you go back to Moses' day, God said to Moses at one point, basically, I want you to split up into 2 parts, okay? Go to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and he said on one mountain put the blessing, on one mountain put the curse. And I thought that's kind of interesting if you go back and basically what's actually happened here. But on that note, we've wrapped up another Bible study video, short, sweet and concise. And as you can see, as we continue to go through these books, you can see how easily you can literally take a simple, just left to right Bible study, walk yourself through it and gain some good understanding as you're actually doing it. So on that note, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and obviously hit the bell notification setting for instant notifications. And as always, don't forget to swim daily in the Word of God. And if you've got any video recommendations, any comments or any conversations you want to start, comment below the video and let's all grow together as believers. Thanks and take care.